Look, just to begin, can you pinpoint a particular time when you decided a career in music is what you wanted?
Um, for me, starting off in the music business, I think began when I was about 8 years old and I was at school, and I always wanted to be able to do school concerts and things like that, and I did, and I bought my first guitar by selling papers and having a paper round so I could get some money, and my first guitar cost me 10 shillings, but it still took a long time to save that up. I came from a working class family, and once I got a guitar and started to learn one or two chords, I just felt I was going to be like the new Elvis Presley. And I did actually hone my craft by doing concerts, but I only knew two chords. So one of my first songs was the Purple People Eater, and I just played the G chord and just kept playing, just keep singing and keep playing, and they won't notice, But that's where it started, and from then on, I always wanted to be a singer, and I started doing folk songs and singing on the beach near my home in Elwood, and people like Ian Meldrum or Molly Meldrum, they were part of the group of people that I would go to the beach through the summer every weekend and sing to these people from my repertoire of folk songs.
Tell us about the Flies and how that band got together. Was it pretty much on the back of Beatlemania that you were inspired to put that together?
Yes, it was on the back of Beatlemania. I was singing these folk songs, and then when the Beatles came out, they were doing sort of a combination of what I would call soft rock and folk in a way, because songs like Nowhere Man, those sorts of songs were almost folky. So I really was attracted to that combination that made their particular style, and I loved their image, the pointy shoes and the long hair. And so I was just fascinated and started to learn a couple of their songs. And then the Sky rang me and said, we're going to start a band. We've got 3 members. We want a lead singer and a rhythm guitarist. And we got together, and our manager came up with the Flies. And I think he came up with the name of the Flies was because of the Beatles, Buddy Holly and the Crickets. And, these days you wouldn't call yourself the Flies, but that was the beginnings.
The wave of insect bands.
Yes.
You got to support You supported the Rolling Stones on one of their early tours. Is that right?
Yeah, it was pretty early in the Flies were together about 2.5 years, and early in that 2.5 years, we did support the Stones, and we did the Palais Theatre in Melbourne, and I think on that same show was Roy Orbison, a band called the New Beats. They did a song called I Like Bread and Butter.
Ah, yeah, Bread and Butter.
They they sang in that sort of falsetto voice, which Barry Gibb sort of brought back many years later. So, yeah, the Stones were lovely to us. We went to a few parties with them, and Brian Jones was alive at that time, and I spent a bit of time talking to him in the dressing room, so you try to pick up on what other people are doing with success.
Now, the legends have it that you and Ian Meldrum were thrown out of Festival Hall back in 1964 at the Beatles show. What are your memories of that night?
Well, Molly came to live with me and my family for a couple of weeks. He used to catch a bus opposite our place. We lived in Elwood in Melbourne, and I used to catch a bus to go into work at Myer. I was in window dressing, and he used to catch the same bus to go to Monash University to study law. I don't think he ever studied law. I think he took some books and he used to sit outside at lunchtime, and everyone thought he was studying. But he came to live with me and my parents for 2 weeks. He wanted to get away from his aunties who lived over the road from where I was living, and he asked, could he come and live with us for 2 weeks? And I said, oh, look, my dad's a butcher. He gets up at 3 o'clock in the morning. We've never ever had anyone live with us and for any amount of time. But he's in the lounge room. You go and ask him. So he went in and he came back to me in the kitchen and said, your dad said, yes, I can come and live here for two weeks. But he didn't stay 2 weeks. He stayed 9.5 years. And he consequently, in the end, when my wife Maggie and I got married, my manager, Jeff Joseph, was the best man, and Molly was the matron of honour, so to speak.
And what are your memories of that night at Festival Hall?
Oh, at Festival Hall, we bought tickets. We actually camped, that's the operative word, camped outside Maya for 2 nights. So we took sleeping bags or blankets and pillows, and we bought our tickets. There was a long line of kids, and we were right up the front, so we had early tickets. And we bought a whole row for all our friends. So we went with our friends, and we all sat down, and it was very exciting because we were going to see the Beatles. And mind you, in those days, because Ken Brodziak had bought them for £5,000, they only wanted to do 5 songs. They didn't do a 2-hour show or anything like that, a 2-hour concert. So we were waiting, and here they come, here they come. When they came out on stage, all the girls in the auditorium just rose to their feet screaming, including Molly. So he was screaming like a girl, and while it was happening, St John's ambulance guy made his way down where we were sitting and said, I think I better take this guy outside, because he was hysterical. He was just, they thought he was going to have a heart attack.
Oh, goodness.
So I said, no, he'll be okay. I sat him down, and I said, Ian, sit down, and he sat down, and a couple of songs later, Ian was up again, Molly was up again, screaming, and the St John's ambulance guy came back, and I must have made a fist, and I think I made the fist to sort of say to Ian, if you don't sit down, I'll knock you down. But the security guards or the ushers saw my fist, and so they grabbed the both of us and put our arms up behind our backs and threw us out just when Paul McCartney was doing Long Tall Sally. And Ian outside Festival Hall was screaming, was still going, and I think his fingernail marks are still etched in the timber door of Festival Hall in Melbourne.
Leaving the Flyers, was that pretty much a result of your desire to pursue a solo career?
Yeah, I think I never intended to do that in the beginning, because when you're with a band, you're relying on other people to keep that whole thing together. We learnt a lot of songs. We were very popular where we were singing. Like, we travelled a little bit up to Brisbane and Adelaide. But it just came about that I felt like we were at loggerheads a little bit as what songs so 2 of the members in the band wanted to do the Beatles and the Honeycombs and those sort of bands, and then the other 2 wanted to do Rolling Stones and the Animals and those. So we were clashing a little bit on the songs, and I thought, look, I think I'll leave and I'll just do what I want to do by having a solo career. And it was a bit of destiny. It just had to happen, and I look back on it with a lot of fondness.
So once the solo career got started, who was responsible for selecting material for you to record? Did you have much of a say in that yourself?
Oh, we all had an equal say. We're still very good friends to this day, the 4 members, and we always wanted to work together, and we didn't clash in that way. We just clashed in our selection of songs, which made a bit of a difference, but getting to that point was always amicable. And one of the boys in the band who I keep in regular contact now with, he's a Greek Orthodox priest or monk in Africa, and he builds orphanages, and my wife and I build respite centres as a healing source for young children in Australia. So we're doing similar things even to this day, and yeah, we're very good mates. So we did agree on all the songs at that time up until the last moment, and then I decided to leave.
What about in your solo career? Did you have much of a say in your selection there?
I had all the say. I chose the songs that I wanted to do. I had a number of singles, probably 2 or 3 before John called me on my birthday, and he said, which is the 8th of September, and he said, I've written a song for you as a birthday present. Can I play it to you? So he played Smiley on the phone to me, and he said, I've already organised for John Farrar and Molly Meldrum to produce this. We all produce it together. So Ronnie, Molly, Johnny and Johnny get together and produce this song called Smiley. So I just loved it. We were in the studio only one day later, I think, and in those days we put it all down very quickly. So that was my first gold record, and that's what I was after, was to have that gold record.
Wow. There was a Bee Gees connection with some of your earlier hits. How did those songs come to you and were not actually recorded by the band themselves?
Well, they wrote a lot of songs, so they had this catalogue of songs, and they were attempting to record them, because in those days there was a television show called Bandstand and 6 O'Clock Rock with Johnny O'Keefe, and they were doing those shows, and they would perform some of their songs on those shows. So once they got a hit, I don't know what the hit was, but it was more of a hit in Sydney than it was in the rest of Australia. My manager approached their manager and asked if we could have a listen to some of the songs, the original songs. So I loved them. When I heard the demo tapes, they actually sounded like the Beatles. And the Beatles had done a song called Taxman, and the Bee Gees had written a song called Coal Man. So I was attracted to their writing, because they did actually sound like the Beatles. And so I flew up to Sydney, and we did a single in just a couple of hours. It was down and done and dusted. But they picked me up at the airport in a beaten-up combi van and asked me if I could put some petrol in the car. They didn't have any money. And so I put petrol in the car, we did the recording, and I went back to their place that night, and they were so poor they couldn't afford all the strings on their guitar. They had one guitar between the three of them.
Wow.
And they only had two strings, which is the E string and the A string. And with that E and the A, if you go bum, 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 where are the sun? They wrote Spicks and Specks for two strings.
Goodness me.
They played it to me. They actually played that song to me, and I said, "Can I have that?" And they said, "No, we're going to release this as our next single." But I knew I got Spicks and Specks.
Wow. Did you find you had a pretty good ear for a hit in those days when a song was brought to you? You sort of had a feeling about it?
Well, I did have a feeling. I felt I had a pretty good ear, especially with Smiley and Age of Consent, and then Johnny Young wrote a whole album for me called Virgo, because of being a Virgo. But along the track, some other friends of mine who were associated with the band today, who's called The Mixtures, one of the guys' brothers came to me with a song called the Push Bike Song. And he played the song to me, and I said, "Riding along on a push bike. No, that's not for me. That's not for me." I passed on that one, but that was an international hit. But they tricked it up with all that. They tricked it up with all of that, which I wouldn't probably have thought of. So good luck to them. They had a #1 world hit with it.
Is that true you passed on the Real Thing as well? I think I read somewhere that was offered to you before Russell.
No.
No?
No. It was talked about because Molly was living with me. Johnny Young was a friend of mine at that time, and you would have thought that might have come my way, but it was offered to Russell via Molly. It probably would have come to me if Molly hadn't been involved, but Molly picked it, and then he produced it, and it was a big hit for Russell.
Now, Age of Consent was written by Terry Britton from the Twilights. There's another Twilights connection with you. You appeared in their TV pilot. Do you have any memories of that?
Well, yeah, because we were all friends of each other's youth. We were all collaborators, or everyone worked together. So if Johnny Young wanted some vocal backing, I would do that. If the Twilights wanted me, they had enough singers in the band, but we used to just all work with one another. We worked on stage with one another. We used to hang out on weekends with one another. This is all those people around that time, including John Farnham and just everybody, Bev Harrell. And so it wasn't like we were all seriously touring, but we did work in different capital cities together or singularly, but we were in each other's company a lot, and I think that it put us in good stead to challenge the status quo in Sydney, because in Sydney they wouldn't let us in. They wouldn't really let in Normie Rowe, myself, John Farnham. They just wouldn't let us into that niche, because up there you had Cold Joy and Lucky Star and Little Patty. But then I won the Bandstand Award for the Best Male Artist, and that was the very last bandstand with Brian Henderson that was done at the Sydney Mine Music Bowl. Peter Allen was on the show, and once I won that, it broke the ice, and we then all got into Sydney. Because of the television shows of that time were saturated through New South Wales, and that was Uptight, Happening 70, Commotion, so that we couldn't be ignored. We were doing too much.
Yeah. Yeah. You never really pursued songwriting in a big way yourself. Did you have no real interest of going down that path?
I wrote a couple of songs with the Flies, and one of them was recorded on the flip side of one of the Flies singles, which was called Tell Her That. And then later, so I never really pursued songwriting. I was more into being not so much a singer. I felt that John Farnham was more a singer. I wanted to be an entertainer. I wanted a career that would last a long time. A little bit like there was Graham Kennedy, and then you had this other guy, Bert Newton, and he was always in the background, but he was always there, and he's lived through to this day still in entertainment. So I didn't really focus on songwriting until one day I got together with Rick Springfield at my place, and he was giving me a couple of songs, one of which I recorded, and then we wrote another one together. I don't even know what happened to it, but I remember we did write a song together. It just got shelved, I think.
Now, a major moment in your life would have been the day, of course, you met the love of your life, Maggie. How clearly do you remember that day?
Oh, it's etched. It's etched in my heart. So there was a television show called Dig We Must, because in those days you say, I can dig it, man, I can dig that, and I can dig this. So Dig We Must. And all of us used to do the show, and each time they recorded it, which I think it went for an hour, and we recorded it at the ABC in Elstonwick in Melbourne, that they would have one special guest, and then they would build the show with dancers and other singers around that. So they had me in as the special guest, and when I arrived and was sort of heading toward the dressing room, the dancers were up on stage, and I was just besotted when I saw Maggie. I was like that little character in Roadrunner with the tongue hanging out, the eyes popping out of the head. And I just wanted to meet her. You've got to go to the dressing room. You've got to get makeup on. I just couldn't move. I was frozen. I was just watching her. And so from that day, or the next day, or a couple of days later, we started going out, and we've been together for 50 years.
Fantastic. And moving forward a few years and working with Daryl Cotton and Russell in touring together, that must have been a wonderful period for you.
It was. I mean, in a sense, John, it was all wonderful. The whole thing was incredible. It was a wonder-filled life. I'd do it all again. It was just so exciting, and it's still exciting. But Russell was singing around the clubs around the country in different places. He wasn't doing a lot, and at that time, and Daryl was doing similar things, and Daryl rang me and said there's a club in Melbourne, in Hawthorne, would like to see if the three of us would get up on stage and just sing a couple of songs each, 3 songs each. And there wasn't much in it. I think it was $500 each to get up and do this thing. So we said, yeah, okay. So we got together and we rehearsed 3 songs each, and we sung on each other's songs. So I sang and Daryl, we sang on The Real Thing, and they sang on Smiley, and it just gelled. It was just because we knew each other so well, and we knew those songs are attached to our career and everything we'd ever done. So when we went to the club the night that we'd been advertised to sing, the place was absolutely chock-a-block with women in short skirts. And we just couldn't believe it. And when we got up on stage, they were screaming in the miniskirts and the black stockings. It's like, oh my God, it's like we've gone back
in time.
Amazing. But the women were, our age or a little bit younger. So we went back to the dressing room, and the owner of the club said, "Can you come back in 2 weeks and do it again?" We said, "Oh, hang on, we're only going to do this once." But yeah, we'll come back. So we came back and did it again, and then we could hardly even get into the club to get to the dressing room. It was more than overfilled with people, and it was exciting, really exciting. So we decided we'd form a band, and we'd call it Burns, Cotton and Morris, and we rehearsed at my house for about 3 months, and we just rehearsed because I'd never sung harmony before, and Daryl and Russell, mainly Daryl, taught me how to sing harmonies, taught me how to get that idea together, and then we hired a studio in South Melbourne with a band, and when we sung it through speakers and I heard back that vocal sound or that vocal wall, I couldn't believe it. It was just phenomenal. And so we had 5.5 years of Burns, Cotton and Morris. Then I left to do things in Tasmania. I left the band, and they got the Jim Keys came in, and he filled my position, and he brought a different range of songs, a different genre of songs to that band.
Now, I can't let you go without talking about the wonderful work you and Maggie have been doing over the years with Appin. Tell us about how the whole thing got set up initially, your initial goals for it, and what prompted you to establish it.
Well, we were living in Melbourne, and we were minding our own business, and at that time, flat screen televisions came out. So they were only little. They were about 500 or 600 wide and about 400 high. And I said to Maggie, "Why don't we get one of these flat screen televisions? And in fact, why don't we get a new car? Just maybe a second-hand one, or just get a new car." And she said, "No, we won't be spending on all of that," because we had a TV, normal TV. And I remember that. And then we just had an idea that we might build a principle for the protection of children, because we'd always done so much with kids, with our own children, and Maggie and I doing Young Talent Time she did the choreography for 12 years. And so we decided we'd look at Tasmania, and we went over there and we found some land, and then we sold up everything we had in Melbourne and we moved there permanently. And we stayed there for 21 years and processed 6,500 bed nights of children and their families, and it was absolutely wonderful. But now we've closed down the Tasmanian part of it, and we're going to buy land in Gippsland in the high country where there's no electricity, no mobile phone service, and we're going to build what you would call a French chateau. So it's like a castle, which is what chateau means, and again it will be a healing centre or a respite centre for children suffering all sorts of things, serious illness, grief, abuse, trauma. We've done it before. It works the way that we do it, and we would look after kids all over Australia. So this time around we'll have a lot of staff, and we'll have an office that runs the whole show, unlike Tassie where we did most of it ourselves. And so we're very excited. We'll present to government probably in about 5 weeks' time as to what we want to do here.
Well, everything you've achieved already down in Tassie, it must fill you with an incredible sense of pride and satisfaction, and there must be some wonderful stories through the years that...
The stories are wonderful, and I was thinking of writing a book about it, but I don't have the time to do that. And I think in Indigenous tribes, they don't so much write it down. It's a spoken thing. It's a spoken story that gets spoken. And we do a lot of public speaking and talking to, Rotary clubs and schools and all sorts of things about the work that we do. And those stories hold people's imagination, and you can get the message across as to what we do. But they've changed our lives, those children. We've changed our own lives, and we don't have such a desire to be wealthy and rich. We really just want to continue the work we're doing because it puts so much love and joy in your heart, and you see the difference that it makes in the lives of children, be they sick or traumatised or whatever, that even if you took all the money out of the equation, we would still do it in some way, even if it was in a tent, because they need the help. These struggling families, their lives get turned upside down when their child might be diagnosed with cancer, and dad has to give up work to take the child to Melbourne or to Sydney or wherever. So we hear their stories, we've worked with them, and we're very passionate about what we do, but we can't do it unless we do it with the community and with the media and with organisations that support this type of work. So we're very grateful to everyone's help.
And the new centre, you say probably roughly about 2 years away from operation.
What we're going to build, John, is two things. One is a French chateau. So I'd say that's likely to open its doors in 3.5 years' time. But we don't want the people, especially in Victoria first up, or in Tasmania, to be waiting that long to come back to Appin Hall. So what we're going to build first is a hamlet. So we'll still build the chateau, but it's going to take a lot longer to build. But we'll build a hamlet on the site of about 8 buildings so that we can start trading or opening our doors to families who need to get out of the city, who need to get into nature. And they, in that hamlet situation, hamlet means that it doesn't have a church. So in England, if you go to a hamlet and you want to go to a church, you have to go to the next village for the church. So it would just be a village that's got primarily those buildings in it that would house the families, and we'd put them in a little winding strip of road with a shop, and they can meet each other and understand that other people are in the same boat as them. So where we're going has rivers, wild animals like dingo, deer, and an abundance of wildlife. And so it's got no electricity and no mobile phone, so it's very peaceful, and we're really looking forward to getting going. But we'll have a lot more staff this time. We just need more help to do it at the level that we're going to do it.
Sounds absolutely wonderful. Do you still get the yearning from time to time to get up on stage?
Not really. I get asked the question, and people sort of look at me with a bit of amazement, and I say to them, look, I've been in the rock and roll business or entertainment business for 50 years, and I loved it. I loved every minute of it. And but my attention now has gone to something else. What I want and am doing with my life is very important to me, and I can't fit in more things, otherwise I can't do the Appin Hall thing. And so I do the Go Show, which was the television show that was around in the early 60s, and I do it once a year, which it's staged, and sometimes we do Melbourne, Adelaide, Perth, we've done Tassie, Sydney, we do Tweed Heads and Gold Coast, and it's a sellout. There's sellout. At the Palais Theatre in Melbourne, we get 2,600 punters come along to see the show regularly. They just love it.
Yeah.
And we do it again on the 4th of December, I think it is. And on this show, there'll be myself, Normie Rowe, Johnny Young, Colin Hewitt, Doug Parkinson, Rusty Wiley, The Mixtures, Izzy Dye, and I think Little Patty and Lucky Star, because they're from that Sydney ilk. And we love it because we only have to do 2 or 3 songs each, and there's not a lot of pressure, but I just love it because the audience they just love coming and hearing us do all that stuff once again. We're not living in the past, but there's that collaboration again coming together, and we certainly bring all that music to the stage and to the theatre.
Lovely. Hey, Ronnie, thanks so much for your time, and congratulations on not just a wonderful music career, but all the wonderful work that you and Maggie have done with Appin Hall. You're a national treasure in both areas, and it's just an honour to speak to you. Thank you so much, and for those listening, if they want to help, they can go to our website, Appin Hall. So it's www.appin, APPIN, HALL.com, and if they want to
get involved as volunteers, or if they'd like to help us with donations, what it goes to exactly is what we've just been talking about. So thank you for having me, and it'll soon be Christmas, so have a Merry Christmas.
And to you too. All the best, Ronnie. I know you're very busy, so I'll let you go.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Cheers.